This video is sponsored by Stack Audio, manufacturers of the Orva speaker and equipment isolation feet used by a British audiophile. For more information about these and other products, please click the link in the description. I was looking forward to finding out how floor standing speakers would perform in this new room. It's fairly modest in size, about 14 by 12 feet, that's 4.3 by around 3.7 meters, smaller than my old room, but it has more soft furnishings, acoustic treatment panels and a massive wraparound sofa that does a reasonable job of acting like a bass trap. There are compact floor standers that work well in tight spaces. Some speakers are tuned to benefit from boundary reinforcement in the bass, and it's easier to design larger speakers these days that keep cabinet resonances under control. Thanks to sophisticated computer modelling techniques, a friend of mine is very pleased with how his Neat Elites perform in a room that's smaller than mine. I'm very selective about the floor standing speakers I get in for review, not just because they're a pain in the butt to deal with logistically, but I want to get speakers in that perform well in my space, and the brand that I'm reviewing today shows a fine pedigree. You're more likely to be familiar with Raidho than its sister company Scansonic. The Danish high-end brand is known for its ribbon tweeters and carbon fibre drivers, with the range-topping models retailing for 200 grand. But those core elements are present in the speaker that's the subject of today's review, and a lot of work has gone into the cabinet to clean up the sound. So how do they perform in my modest size listening room? The Scansonic MB speakers were originally the work of well-known designer Michael Borenson, hence the MB initials in the name, but he's since moved on to co-found Audio Group Denmark. In 2019, the speakers were revised by current chief designer of Raidho and Scansonic, Benno Baun Melgaard, and the range picked up an MB-B designation. You'll be lucky to find a pair of floor-standing speakers as elegant with a smaller footprint than the MB2-5Bs. They retail for £3,750 a pair in white or black, and a walnut finish is available for £4,500. The cabinets stand a fraction under 1 metre tall, merely 178mm wide and 286mm deep, with each speaker weighing 15.4 kilograms. That's 39.3, 7 by 11.3 inches and 34 pounds. They're beautifully constructed, from the machined outrigger feet, the way they lean back to better time align the drivers, and how the cabinet curves and tapers around the back to reduce internal standing waves. The main cabinet is MDF, but there are carbon fibre inserts on the front and top to increase structural rigidity. Scansonic claim that it's extensively braced inside. It certainly passes my crude knuckle wrap test. The Scansonic MB2-5B is a 2.5 way design, with the bottom 130mm 5¼ inch woofer handling frequencies from a stated 36Hz to 500Hz. An identical mid-woofer plays up to 2600Hz, at which point the ribbon tweeter takes over. The woven carbon fibre material is inherited directly from Raidho speakers, selected for high stiffness and low mass. It's a dust cap free design, which tends to reduce breakup nodes at low frequencies in favour of the more extended frequency response of a good dust cap design. The driver sits in a cast aluminium basket, has an overhung magnet system favouring a long stroke over linearity. According to Scanspeak, the spider and suspension system has been optimised to reduce losses. The midwoofer has been designed, developed and built in-house. As has the tweeter, formed from a Captain aluminium sandwich only 20 microns thick. The resulting mass of 0.03 grams is approximately 50 times lighter than a conventional dome. Trickle-down technology from Raidho, including the sealed sides, to ensure better integration with the mid-woofer. The base conceals a downward-firing port. This configuration generally allows closer placement to boundaries. The rear has one set of reasonable quality speaker binding posts, located towards the bottom to keep things looking pretty. All that attention to detail in the design work has paid off. The Scansonic MB2-5Bs are one of the most well sorted floor standing speakers I've heard, They sound clean, more dynamic than the size would suggest, and have excellent soundstage and imaging capabilities. None of that would be possible if Messrs Borison and Meldgaard couldn't keep cabinet resonances under control. The bass is delivered with authority, weight and agility that's on par with some very accomplished stand mount speakers. They're not as resolving in the low frequencies as the Alta audio Alyssas, but these £5,000 stand mounts are a transmission line design, and deep, tight, accurate bass is their thing. Actually, the Alyssas have a bit more resolution across the rest of the frequency range too, but the equivalent floor stander is £9,000. Okay, so the Alyssas are no longer here, and before someone comments I'm not relying purely on audio memory, it's too unreliable. I have other speakers here providing a common point of reference. If there are subtle differences between speakers, I need to do a side-by-side comparison, but obvious differences are easy to pick out when you've got a common point of reference. So, how do the MB2-5Bs compare to some of my other reference speakers? In fact, the svelte Scansonic floor standers can match the £1,800 quad Revela ones for information retrieval abilities, with a wide open soundstage and clear instrument separation. Neither the quads nor the Scansonics are quite as accomplished at extracting nuanced timbre from vocals and lead instruments as my Prior Response 1 SEs. Despite their vintage, these speakers deliver extraordinary mid-range resolution. There are significant differences in the tonal presentation of these three speakers. The Revela ones are a little bit more forward in the mid-range than the 1SEs, but certainly not aggressive. The MB2.5Bs also push that critical mid-band a little further forward than the 1SEs, but with a more relaxed upper mid-range. It takes the edge off bright recordings, but it also robs them of some realism with things like brass instruments. I have to admit that these differences are easier to pick out with recent improvements to my digital front end. The Volumio Rivo Plus is more resolving than the Auric Aries G1, and the same is true of the new Gustard R30 DAC with respect to my Denafrips Pontus 15th. The Pontus 15th is going nowhere at the moment. I do love the richness to the sound of that DAC. Time for this week's music suggestion. Celestial Echo from Malia's Convergence album is an excellent recording to judge spatial presentation, blending Boris Blank from Yellow's atmospheric electronics with her soulful vocals. The Scansonic tweeter is exceptional. There's a lovely airiness to the sound with fabulous refinement and timing. It reminds me of a couple of other speakers. Again, they're not here, so I'll just point out obvious differences and similarities. The Buchardt E50s share many traits with their Danish bedfellow: a beautifully open top end, a natural and resolving mid-range, and even the tonality with a polite upper mid-range. Both speakers produce an impressive soundstage, but the MB2.5Bs deliver great bass weight and extension than the E50s, but give up some assurity in the localization of performers. Whilst I'm at it, I may as well comment about the Neat Elite Classics that I mentioned in the intro. Retailing for £3,250 in the UK, the Elites can't match the Scansonics for deep bass or dynamics, but offer similar levels of mid-range detail without the recessed presence region. They also have a wonderfully revealing and civilized tweeter. Enough with the comparisons. I had to work quite hard to get these speakers to perform in my room, so let's get into that. The Scansonic MB2.5Bs produce more bass than I expected, given the size of the enclosure, the long throw drivers and additional woofer to take care of 500 Hz and below has something to do with that. I had to place them further into my room than most stand mounts to get the bass to tighten up, wider apart from each other to get the mid-range not to sound thick, and have the tweeters towed in directly at my ears in order to get maximum energy in the upper mid-range. They're sensitive to positioning. Little adjustments make quite a bit of difference. It's worth the effort, but if you don't have the flexibility in your room, there are better choices. Thankfully, they're really easy to drive. Hardly any speakers of 88 dB sensitivity into 6 ohms work with 300B amps like the Brunico Terra, running here with upgraded PS Vane Summit Series 6SN7 and 300B tubes. This combination sounded gloriously open, rich and detailed. It wasn't soft despite the amp only producing a measly 8 watts per channel, as long as average listening levels remained south of 80 dB. I suspect the MB2-5Bs have a fairly flat impedance curve with no unusual electrical phase angles. That's not always a priority when designing speakers at this price because they're likely to be paired with amplifiers that can cope with it, but it does mean on this occasion you can get away with less powerful amplifiers. Anyway, the Terror review is coming as soon as I get in some high sensitivity speakers to pair with it. I've rarely heard the Exposure 2510 sound as good as it did with the Scansonic floor standers. Most speakers at this level pull the 2510's modest power supply all over the place, including the Quad Revela 1s and my Product Response 1 SEs, but this time composure was maintained. Extra grip and power is what the Hegel H190 delivers, which may be a benefit to those looking to place the MB2.5Bs in larger rooms and play loud, but the improvement was marginal at best in my space and at the moderate levels that I tend to play at. One of my old Exposure power amps died last week and the preamp showing wear on the volume pot. It crackles when you turn it up and one of the channels cuts out from time to time, so I've sent it back to Exposure for a service and repair. In their place is the modern day equivalent, the 3510 preamp and monoblocks. I'll review them once I get my vintage Exposure amps back for a side-by-side comparison. For now, let me state that the overall performance was appreciably better than from the 2510 and H190. Okay, let's pull this all together. The Scansonic MB2.5Bs prove that looks can be deceiving. Ultra slim towers with relatively small carbon mid-woofers and a ribbon tweeter. They're certainly not bright or weedy. The bass is deep, weighty and articulate. The mid-range is full and resolving, and the highs are gloriously unbridled, yet remain refined. They're finicky about positioning. If you don't have the flexibility to move them around, go for something else. Also, I wish, like a lot of other Danish speakers that I've heard, that they didn't have that polite upper mid-range. It makes them forgiving of bright recordings, but it also robs them of a little bit of realism. That aside, these are one of the finest sounding speakers available for the money. The Scansonic MB2.5Bs get a very highly recommended from this channel. I suspect I was at the limit of what I could accommodate in terms of bass energy with these speakers in my room. I certainly don't think I'll be getting any of their bigger brethren in for a review anytime soon. And that got me thinking about the question for today. What experiences have you had about accommodating speakers in your room? What's worked, what hasn't worked? Please share that in the comment section. I'm sure you know what to do by now if you want to support me here and what I do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of tiers you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon, which has some great ways to interact with me and fellow Patreons. But for today, for now, British Audiophile, signing off.